Order, House Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications Committee. A lot of meetings happening today, a lot of stuff going on, and the author of the bill is here, and I think he has someplace he has to go after talking about the bill and whatever we might decide to do with it this time. But we do need to take care of a couple of things first, and that is I want to welcome the members to the meeting. We have a good turnout today. We have a couple new members, and one of them is this gentleman right here from Cobb County, Representative Matt Dollar. Trey Kelly, I think, is not here, and David Stover, he might be on the way. I just saw him a few minutes ago. So we have three new members of the committee who we welcome. And you should have, I believe they have the copies of the proposed, we have the rules we need to, the committee we need to adopt. No changes. These are the same rules that have been for this committee for as long as I can remember, and I've been on the committee for 20 years. So if you take a look at those, no changes. If there is no objection, is there any objection to adopting these rules? Hearing no objection, the rules are adopted. With that, Chairman Geisinger, you chaired a special subcommittee over the interim, and if you will tell us about that briefly and the status of the issue that you were reviewing over the interim and what the status of that issue is right now, whether there's a bill or what action, if your subcommittee has taken any kind of action. If you would tell us that, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we did have a lengthy summer. Actually, it was 10 months. And the committee worked with the author and the principal parties involved, the utilities as well as the solar. And bless their heart, after 10 months they worked it out. And when we had our hearing to pass out the legislation, which was reintroduced as amended, for a legislative hearing, it sounded like a love-in.
Okay, and so you had a love-in, and and the committee came up with language for a bill. Is that correct?
That's correct. And it was introduced.
And the bill has been introduced.
Yes.
Now, that language of the bill that you had in your subcommittee, I think your subcommittee took some action on that, and you approved that language that you came up with.
We did.
And that is exactly the same language as in this bill. This bill is in the full committee, but since your subcommittee has done all that study, brought everybody together, came up with language that we'll find out, how everybody, all the parties feel about it for sure. But so that language has been put into a bill, which is now in this committee, and because of what you and your subcommittee have done, I appreciate it very much. Chairman Geisinger has done just wonderful work on this, and I appreciate you, and members of the special committee.
That's very concise, and yes, that's correct.
All right. So with that, the bill is actually in the committee. I'm not going to assign it to a subcommittee, all this having been done. So now we have this bill in the committee. The author is Representative Dudgeon, and Representative Dudgeon, I'm going to recognize you to present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to present. It is LC 362633ER, and as Chairman Geisinger mentioned, that's the identical language that was talked about in subcommittee, though it didn't have a House bill number at the time, but it was the identical language. First, I want to say thanks to Chairman Parsons and Chairman Geisinger for issuing marching orders, which was to get everybody to agree. And those are the best orders possible. It took longer than most processes, but we did get everybody to agree, and I appreciate that. I think setting that tone really helped out with this process. I'd also like to thank the power companies, the MEAGs, the EMCs, and everybody involved, because we had over 90 parties involved. I mentioned over 40 EMCs, over 40 municipal electric authorities, several solar companies, Georgia Power, Way too many attorneys for my taste, but we made it work one or the other. But it actually was a very healthy process. And the thing I liked about it the most, Mr. Chairman, was that everyone approached the table with open, honest attitude, trying to reach a good deal. And I think we've reached a deal that makes everybody happy. And so I'm very happy to present that today. Again, it was the product of 10 months of careful work. Lawyers have signed off on every word and every period and every comma in this document. And so I will hope the committee will indulge that we hopefully don't have to do any amendments, just because it was very delicate to get this compromise. And obviously, if the committee has very important things, I certainly would like to look at that, but I just would like to point out that this was the result of 10 months of very careful negotiation. So what I would like to do is just very quickly highlight some parts of the bill. I put a document, I always like to do things in English instead of in lawyerese, which is my one-page summary of the bill. So first, just very quickly, what does the bill do? The bill really has one simple purpose: to clarify that solar financing for residential and small business applications is legal in Georgia. I won't go through all the history of why it wasn't legal in Georgia before, but this bill makes it very clear that any kind of financing that the free market wants to offer will be available to those customers. That includes when the plan might be based on the power generated by the solar array, and that has been a point of contention before, but that is strictly legal under this bill. The bill does not deal with natural gas or any other forms of energy. It doesn't deal with net metering. It doesn't deal with, it really is about financing. It's about opening up financing. And why is that important? Because right now a big barrier to entry in Georgia for solar at the smaller level is the lack of appropriate financing. Our friends at Georgia Power has done a great job with the last RFP and the Public Service Commission of putting a ton of utility scale solar on the agenda to be put in. But if you look at how Georgia's doing as a state, we are way behind in the small business and the residential area. The last graph I saw at a conference, it was so small you couldn't even see it on the bar graph. So what we believe is that this will start to open the market for companies to come in who finance, which means that $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 upfront cost goes away. And by putting the power purchase as part of the lease, it makes a lot of customers more comfortable. Other states have adopted this kind of financing arrangement, have seen a major uptick in those adoptions. It's not a tax subsidy. It has nothing to do with tax policy. This is not a new tax program or extension of a subsidy. This is strictly about allowing free market financing companies to come into Georgia in a certain legal environment. So I'll highlight some parts of the bill on my little page here. One important concession that took a long time to work out in lines 49 through 33 is we limit the size of the property. The size of the installation that can be done. It's 10 kilowatts for a residential, and then up to 125% of the load for a commercial application. This took a long time to come up with this limit. The idea of a limit is that this bill is primarily for financing use on-site premise. This is not to make a backdoor way to do a third-party agreement, which was talked about in this General Assembly a few years ago. This is not that at all. So if you're going to put a solar array, it needs to be sized for your premise. You're not going to have a 5-acre tract of land, put up a shed with one light bulb, and put a 1 megawatt array in the back and say it's for your personal use. Again, all sides have agreed on this language. 57 and 60, I got a nice definition, nice education from the attorneys about premises versus property. It's important to note that you can have a premise essentially is an electrical meter. Think about it that way, lines 57 through 60, and you can have a property with multiple premises. Think like a school might have a main meter for the school, then one out there for the football stadium and such like that. So we wanted to make sure that that was installations were matched with the premise and property guidelines. 73 and 74 point out that it's only relevant for solar that's connected to the grid. If you want to go out and build your mountain hideout with totally solar and don't connect to the grid, then knock yourself out. But this bill is not concerning with that. Basically, the basic authorization is at 76, which basically says solar technology at or below the capacity limit may be financed by the retail customer. And so that's really sort of the money part of the bill, which authorizes that in that section. Line 90 through 97 is important. That's indemnity for the power providers. If some third party puts in a solar installation and it blows up the transformer and stuff, that because of faulty installation by the solar company, that's obviously not the power company's fault. So we have indemnity there that's been agreed to. Line 101 talks about properties with multiple premises. It gets kind of technical, but basically saying, again, if you've got the school or the sort of business complex with multiple meters, you can have capacity to provide all your site, but you have to size it appropriately for the meters so you don't end up sending a whole bunch of electricity across the electrical systems, power lines, sort of against their will. 108 through 124 is the regulatory situation for these installations. This was another point of very detailed and positive but lengthy negotiations about what sort of requirements can the PSC and the EMCs put on these installations. And there's two classes, and so class 1 is your smaller installation, which is your residential and your smaller commercial. And it lists right there, basically, this is the National Electrical Code and Underwriters Lab, your basic electrical safety type things. That's the only thing that can be provided. The concern is we don't want the power companies to regulate this stuff to death to try to keep it out of the market, and I don't believe that's going to happen. For bigger installations in Section B there, line 120, it does provide sort of a more generic clause for requirements, but only for public safety, power quality, and reliability. And like I said, one wonderful thing about this bill is I think it's been done in good faith by all parties in a very positive manner. I don't believe there's any party to this agreement who's trying to sneak language in so they can go against something that everyone agreed to. I think everybody, that is a good faith language to say that if you've got a several hundred kilowatt installation, and being an electrical engineer, I appreciate the fact that Georgia Power and the EMCs need to know and be consulted and maybe have adequate requirements to make sure that very large installation is not going to affect the reliability of our grid, which they do such a good job in taking care of for us. Lines 125 and 130 through 135 are basically saying that we don't affect the Territorial Act. It was very important to say this is not trying to open up the Territorial Act to change anything with it. We're basically making sure that we're keeping in our same sandbox. 136 and 140 basically says that we're allowing the power companies, EMCs, to get into this business. If they want to become solar financing agents, then they can knock themselves out. There was an agreement, though, that says that people stick in their territory. So Cobb EMC is not selling solar financing in Sawney EMC or Georgia Power's territory. So that was part of the agreement. 146 and 155 were important to our friends in the city governments and to the real estate agents, basically saying we're not accidentally creating some sort of inherent property right to solar that would trump a zoning authority of the board. And so we're just clearing that out. And also same thing with real estate, just making sure we're not accidentally creating some sort of inalienable right to solar. Again, this bill is about financing. We are opening up the financing market. I skipped over, 139 is an important line, though it's very technical. Electrical provider who is doing the, who is being a solar financing agent has to be subject to a code section. I verified with Sean Marie for my memory. That code section basically says that a regulated utility cannot discriminate against ratepayers in the same class. And the reason this language in there is very important is that we do not want this bill to create a unfair advantage for our friends at Georgia Power or the power companies to be able to somehow take money from their regular payers and subsidize a solar business so that they could have an unfair competitive advantage. I know my friends at Georgia Power have no intention of doing that. That's not what this bill is all about. It's not the author's intention. It's not the legislation's intention at all. The legislation is intended that anybody who gets in that space is on a level playing field, and there should be no monopoly advantages. And we believe also in this code section and so forth that the PSC regulates that anyway. They look at what goes into the rate of return for the power companies. We believe, and we'll be talking to them about making sure that they look at that. But I'm not concerned because everyone here has been in great faith, but I just wanted to point that out because it is an important point of the negotiations. The last thing pointed out, line 156, this is one from our EMC attorneys. Basically, EMCs operate on long-term big contracts to get power. And a lot of those contracts are, exclusive type contracts saying, I'm only going to buy power from these three people, and therefore I'm going to give you this rate. And just to be careful, we put this language in there which allows the contracts to deal with some de minimis type exceptions under $100,000 If somehow someone wanted to interpret a wholesale power contract to say that Mike Dudgeon's 5 kilowatt solar installation made me a rival to somebody who's supplying power for one of the MCs. Again, I don't think that's ever going to come into play, but we wanted to be very careful with this legislation. I think that's a theme you're seeing here as we really hammered out the details and, again, got everyone on all sides of this to sign off on the bill, and I'm very appreciative of a ton of work and a ton of hours that the utilities especially put in, and with their attorneys and with their staff, untold amount of hours working on this, and just really appreciative. So, Mr. Chairman, that is it for me. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions or anything else the chair would like.
All right, thank you, Representative. It's an important bill. I know that the author has another commitment. We want to be want to honor that, but we don't want to rush it through either. I want to make sure that any questions. So, any questions of the author? If you have any, please ask now. You must have done a really, really good job.
10-month job.
I did want to ask you.
Yes.
We do have a question. Okay.
Just be unfair the first hearing, Mr. Chairman, to let him off the hook without the same question.
There's never a hearing where you don't ask a question, Representative Martin.
Absolutely. And these, I have 3 pages, Mr. Chairman. Should check. No, serious business. You did a great job, and you have done a lot of work. On lines 122, 23, and 24, such additional requirements shall include those necessary. Are those defined in PSC documents? I mean, I understand the groups probably understand what they are, but everybody's happy that they're not. Those 3 lines aren't too subjective.
That's about the 18th version of that paragraph. Okay. There's still some fear, to be straight up honest with you. I think the solar companies wanted a little bit more clarity there, but that was what was eventually agreed to. The key thing is by putting the fact that they had to be public safety, power quality, and system reliability, does kind of put some sort of box on it. And like I said before, I mean, I think everybody's on the page to move forward with this and not regulate it to death, like you said. And if that starts to happen, then we can obviously look at additional regulation, next session or 2 sessions down the road, but I'm not worried about that. But, yeah, that was agreed to by the solar companies.
Fair enough. And in your capacity, if I may, Mr. Chairman, the capacity limit, you define that as 10 kilowatts or the B as 125% of the actual expected. But when you deal with over here, you say 10 kilowatts or 100 kilowatts for commercial. I'm assuming that was done for a reason, because 100 kilowatts is where it really could cause
that's where
the
existing code has a break at 100 kilowatts.
Okay.
Where there's addition. Some of this is actually copied from the regular act, but just for clarity, it was put there. Yeah.
Any further questions?
Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other. I wanted to ask you, Representative, the actual financing, would it be regulated as any other loan process, borrowing money, getting something financed? Is there protection for the customer who actually uses this financing, a financing mechanism? I'm just wondering.
My answer to that would be, I'm sure the laws of Georgia that talk about that would still apply. I mean, the bill doesn't specifically mention that act, but I think any kind of fraudulent type terms would come into play. I mean, the good news is this model is successfully working in several other states, and I'm not aware of a systemic problem where there's been abuse or whatever. So that's something we can look into. But to my knowledge, it would just be the existing laws around financing that exist in the state.
Do you have any concern, and I'm just asking because I think we need to ask these questions here. Do you have any concern, or should we have any concern about, first of all, let me say, I know that the parties that have been involved in this have worked very hard and been very upfront, and we don't have anybody unscrupulous here. But should we have any concern about unscrupulous people coming in and trying to take advantage of people by getting them involved and selling them or financing installations and perhaps promising them more than can be delivered? I mean, how do you feel about that? I'm just asking you.
I'm a free market guy, but I do appreciate the fact that time needed to look at fraud and misrepresentation. I think one good thing is that because there is this fact that essentially the power company has to sign off on the deal. I mean, under a small installation is a small sign off, and a bigger installation is a bigger sign off. That hopefully we would get pretty quick reporting from from the industry if there was a bad player out there. Does this have specific language that prevents bad players from here? It does not. Okay. I'm hopeful that our friends in the solar industry will help self-police and we can identify them, and if we need to, and the important thing is this is not going to explode overnight. It will take a while to ramp this up, but you will start seeing this market come into Georgia. So like everything else we say in the General Assembly, as the market starts to format, if we see bad actors need legislation, I'm very positive to help out with that. But
Okay.
this bill does not do that today. No,
Thank
sir.
you. And I have another question.
All right.
I don't think, maybe there is another question. Did you have a question? I'm looking to, oh, that's your
That's me.
microphone.
I got a question.
The legislation makes it very clear that these company or any company that would offer the financing for this under this language, should it become law, that company is not a electric.
That's correct.
provider.
They are not an electric service provider, which would hit the Territorial Act. Yeah.
But I was just curious, along those lines, you had mentioned the lines in here that provides that the Georgia Power can also offer the same, they can do the same thing, but under some code, but they're not really, the legislation makes it very clear.
And I'll have to go back and find
they're
it.
not really equals.
It says they are the language which says you're not a provider if you're a finance agent does have a disclaimer saying unless you are the local power company. So yes, the Georgia Power does not become a power company by becoming a finance agent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I needed to ask you those questions.
Yeah.
I'm certainly, I don't want to prejudice anybody here, but
No.
obviously it's something that I'm very proud that you've worked on and brought the bill forward, and I think it's a wonderful step. We do have another question. I probably generated it, but I apologize.
That's fine.
Okay.
Come on.
No, Mike, I really appreciate your work and everyone's work who was part of this. This is a technical question. I presume this becomes effective upon the governor's signature because I don't see an effective date in here.
I
I'm
think
just wondering when financing
Legislative
companies are gonna start-
Council would
gonna
correct me if
start-
I'm
start
wrong.
the marketing
if
and all
it
that?
doesn't say anything, it's July 1st. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah. If
Okay.
it's no specific term, it'll be July 1st.
that is correct.
Yeah.
I don't see any further questions of you, Representative. Now, because of the importance of the bill, and here again, I want to make sure that the committee has the opportunity to ask questions and hear what they need to hear, even though a lot of this has been heard, or it all really has been heard in the subcommittee from which this came. But I'm going to ask you what I normally do is ask the author. Is there anybody here that you would like to give any testimony to us?
I think the best thing, if the chair would indulge, would was not even to come up, but if one representative from Georgia Power, one from the EMCs, and one from the solar companies could just give a 1 minute or less sort of thumbs up about the process, just so we have that on the record. I think that would be great
All right,
if the chair would indulge.
Chair will certainly honor that.
Yeah.
I know Georgia Power has been involved in
Yeah.
this. Would you like to come up first?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
I think you need to get a microphone.
Yeah.
These have been.
Yeah.
You probably need a chair too.
That's all right. I'll
Come
just,
on over.
if y'all don't mind, if I bend over, I'll just do it like this.
Hike.
All right, here we go.
There's a chair over here.
No, he's trying to get it on. They're trying to get it on this microphone too. I'm the AV technician today too. So.
Mr. Chairman, the reason Georgia Power has supported this bill, we appreciate the opportunity to have been on the working group and applaud Representative Dudgeon and Chairman Geisinger for allowing us that opportunity. We think it is a responsible, cost-effective way to develop further advanced solar in the state. It protects the integrity and reliability of the electric grid, and it doesn't burden any non-solar customers. So for those very simple reasons, we would be very supportive of this legislation moving forward.
Thank you.
Be glad to field any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Heather.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Dudgeon. My name is Heather Tilley. I represent Georgia EMC, and we're the trade association that represents 41 electric cooperatives. We serve electricity to 73% of the landmass of the state of Georgia and about 4.5 million Georgians. We are also in favor of House Bill 57 and this compromise that Representative Dudgeon has negotiated with us. We've looked for a renewable bill that we could support for many years, and unfortunately in the past we've not been able to do that because it was either a renewable mandate or it was it's something that might threaten the Territorial Act, and this bill does neither of those things. What we really like about this bill are some of the things that we worked on during the negotiating, and that was when Representative Dudgeon agreed with us to include language to protect the lives of our linemen in this bill through some provisions that we added. Also, protecting consumers from reliability problems, like he mentioned with the interconnection agreements. And then lastly, we strengthened the Territorial Act within this bill as well, which we believe keeps rates low and reliability high. We thank Representative Dudgeon and the members of the subcommittee, and we urge you, this committee, to protect this bill from any amendments. We worked on this for close to a year, and any amendments we fear could really break up this compromise that it took a year to reach. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? I don't see any. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jason Rooks, representing the Georgia Solar Trade Association. And Mr. Chairman, you and I have been working on this issue for over 4 years now, and I want to take my limited time to thank Representative Dudgeon specifically. He's had great patience, and I really do thank you for his insight. In this process, I was working with a coalition, and I think it's important for my coalition partners to be listed. I start with the Georgia Property Rights Council, the Georgia Sierra Club, Environment Georgia, Southern Environmental Law Center, South Green Law, Georgia Watch, South Face, and the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. And our newest partner is Georgians for Solar Freedom, with your former colleague Donna Sheldon here today. We're very pleased to reach this point, and if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, but I really appreciate everybody's hard work.
Thank you. Any questions? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm good.
All right. And just in case there's anybody from the public who doesn't understand, I want to make sure that you do understand that this bill was in the subcommittee that Chairman Geisinger chaired. He had public meetings on it. They did a vote on the language of the bill publicly, and at that time there was an opportunity to speak on the bill. We're not trying to keep anybody from speaking, but that opportunity has been given, and the way this committee works and the way it's worked since I've been on it for 20 years is that we do that in subcommittee, and then this is the process that we use in full committee. But any member of the committee obviously still has the opportunity to ask any question or make any comment. Representative Dudgeon, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I appreciate it. I do want to echo the sentiment that, again, I'm going to look to hopefully we can get this through without amendments. If there's, things that come up that are earth-shattering, then I guess we could look at it. But I think it is important to respect the compromise, and I thank everybody. And I just will say for the record that not a single person, either a member of the General Assembly or anybody in the industry, has come to me in opposition to the bill that I know of at this present time. They can still come, but I don't know it right now.
Would you like for us to take some action on the bill
I would
today?
love a motion at this time, Mr. Chairman.
I want to first ask Chairman Geisinger. You worked hard on this, worked hard with Representative Dudgeon on it, spent a lot of time on it during the interim, and I want to give you the opportunity, if you like, if there's anything you'd like to add.
Only, Mr. Chairman, again, I want to say that all the parties worked diligently and pounded this out over a 10-month period, and it's bless them for doing it because it was unbelievable the amount of time it took them and the energies. And, of course, the author who worked with them and very cooperatively. Mr. Chairman, if it's appropriate, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, you may. We're working with LC 362633ER. So you are recognized to make a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that House Bill 57 do pass.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? See no discussion. All in favor of passage, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. House Bill 57 has passed the Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications Committee and is now eligible to apply for rules. Thank you. And with that, does anyone have anything they'd like to?
minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I hate to do a bill and run, but I'm.
We are adjourned. Thank you.